always little pops up. Webinar is now streaming live.
What's up?
Yeah, but they have to give us, I think there's a little.
All right, Mr. Nella, we are live.
We ready? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Cummings. It's great to be with everyone for the Monday, June 15th meeting virtually of the South Bend School Board of Trustees. This meeting I'm calling to order. Ms. Hernandez, would you please do the roll call?
Yes. Mr. John Anella.
Here.
Miss Leslie Wesley.
Here.
Mr. Rudy Monterosa.
Here.
Dr. Ruth Warren.
Here.
Dr. Stuart Green.
Here.
Miss Olitha Jones.
Here.
Miss Stephanie Ball.
Present.
Thank you, Ms. Hernandez. We need to adopt our agenda. It's recommended that the Board of School Trustees adopt the agenda. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Green, seconded by Ms. Wesley. Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against? Okay, we have an agenda. Approval of minutes. It is recommended that the Board of School Trustees approve the verbatim minutes of 2/18/20, 2/25, a special joint meeting with South Bend Common Council, and 3/2/20. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So move.
Second.
Moved by
Mr.
Ms.
Anella?
Leslie and seconded by Mr. Monterosa. Any discussion on the minutes?
Mr. Anella,
Yes, Dr. Warren.
this is new that we've gone back to verbatim minutes, so I just wanted to give some appreciation to the staff because I know it's much more difficult to do. So
Yes.
thank you for all your extra work.
Oh, yes, that's
Thank
a lot
you.
of work. And thank you, Ms. Jones, for bringing it to our attention that we get this back on as verbatim minutes. So thank you as well. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against? Okay, we've approved the minutes. Now it is on to recognitions. Dr. Cummings?
Thank you, Mr. Nella. And as we start recognitions this evening, I would like to pass the podium back to you. We left space for board chair comments.
Oh, thank you. Of course, you know I'm going to have a big smile on my face for this part. As you may know, there was a big vote on June 2nd, and the voters overwhelmingly showed their support and confidence in South Bend schools, ensuring a strong foundation for the future. And so many people had said when we started this that we would not succeed. And well, we did it. So there are many people to thank. First of all, Dr. Cummings, you're our leader. You bring passion, energy, and inspire confidence that will succeed in helping to improve our district. So thank you. Ms. Karima Fowler, you've been working on this longer than anyone, and you've done so much work and endured many hardships to get over this finish line. Thanks for never giving up. And to all the employees of South Bend Schools, teachers, administration, building staff, food service workers, bus drivers, custodial, facilities, and transportation workers, thank you, especially for getting us through this pandemic closure and showing how vital South Bend Schools is to our community's success. So thank you. To the chairs of the Vote Yes PAC, Mary Downs and Councilwoman Karen White, thank you for being leaders in our community and believing in South Bend. To all the volunteers of the PAC, we know how much time and energy you gave to this cause, and this victory is yours. Thank you. To Mayor James Mueller, former Mayor Stephen Lickey, and Pete Buttigieg, and members of the South Bend Common Council, thank you so much for your support. To all the school board members who stood together as one, leading such an important cause for our community during a difficult time. It was best summed up by Dr. Warren on one of the bleaker days during the campaign when she said, "All I can do is put my head down and work." And that you did. Thank you, all of you. But this is the most, yeah, give yourself a round of applause. But this is the most important group to mention. We faced opposition with an unlimited pocketbook, But we always had something so much better than that. We had the people. Our country is facing difficult times on so many fronts, and it's easy to feel powerless and voiceless. But thanks to all of you that put a sign in your yard, told your neighbor to support it, and to every last one of you that voted. It takes a village, and your voices were heard loud and clear. We will pass through these dark times, and we will bask in a bright future. Thank you. And to all the people of this great community, whether you voted yes or no, we acknowledge and accept the great responsibility that lies before us. There's so much work to be done. This is an investment in our future. We need to increase literacy across our district, increase graduation rates, prepare graduates that are college and career ready. We are a diverse community, and we need to ensure we embrace our diversity and create a district that is equitable and inclusive for everyone. We need to create a district that is financially strong and stable and understand the need to right-size our district and drive efficiencies where we can. And finally, we need to do it in partnership with our community through engagement, openness, and transparency. We will continue to grow formal partnerships with community organizations, but on a more organic level, it is so important to engage neighborhood, civic, business, and faith organizations for this grand project to succeed. We aim to build a better future for our children and our South Bend community, and we will only get there together. So thank you for saying yes to South Bend.
Thank you, Mr. Anella.
Back to you, Dr. Cummings, and thank you.
And now I'd like to ask Mr. Monterosa if he would read our Juneteenth proclamation. Mr. Monterosa.
Thank you, Dr. Cummings. Juneteenth Proclamation 2020. Whereas our country is made up of people from every nation on earth who are declared equal not only in freedom, but also in justice, both of which are essential for a healthy human civilization. And whereas our nation was conceived on July 4th, 1776, with the Declaration of Independence, the classic statement being, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." And whereas at 2 p.m. on New Year's Day, January 1st, 1863, using his war powers as president, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, providing that all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state shall be thenceforward, and forever free. And whereas the Emancipation Proclamation made the permanent abolition of slavery a Union war aim and provided the legal framework for the emancipation of nearly all 4 million slaves as the Union armies advanced. And whereas, hearing of the proclamation, many slaves escaped to Union lines as the Army units moved south. And whereas, on June 19, 1865, almost 2.5 years later, Major General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas, and announced the end of both the Civil War and slavery with this announcement, quote, "The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute this involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. The freedmen are advised to remain at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts, and they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere," end quote. And whereas Texans began the celebration of Juneteenth in 1866 with community events such as parades, cookouts, prayer gatherings, musical performances, and historical cultural readings. Some communities purchased land for Juneteenth celebrations, such as Emancipation Park in Houston, Texas. And as freed families immigrated from Texas to other parts of the United States, they carried the Juneteenth celebration with them. And whereas Al Edwards, a freshman state representative, put forward the bill HB 1016 in 1979, making Texas the first state to grant this emancipation celebration. And on January 1st, 1980, Juneteenth became an official Texas state holiday. And whereas, since then, 45 other states and the District of Columbia have also declared it an official holiday. Now, therefore, we, the South Bend Board of School Trustees, do hereby proclaim June 19th, 2020 as Juneteenth in South Bend. Attested to this day, June 15th, 2020, signed Dr. C. Todd Cummings, Superintendent, John Anella, School Board President.
Thank you, Mr. Monterosa. And I'd like to ask Dr. Stuart Green to read our 1619 proclamation. Dr. Green?
Thank you, Dr. Cummings. Whereas the New York Times has published articles and created a series of podcasts making the 400th year since more than 20 enslaved Africans sold to colonists arrived in Virginia in 1619, as part of what they called the 1619 Project. Whereas these Africans were among the 12.5 million Africans who would be kidnapped from their homes and brought in chains across the Atlantic Ocean. Whereas these Africans would be forever separated from their families, suffering in the hulls of the ships, forged in trauma. Whereas almost 2 million did not survive the grueling journey known as the Middle Passage. Whereas 1/5 of the population within the 13 colonies struggled under a brutal system of slavery, unlike anything that had existed in the world before. Whereas the US and global economy flourished on the backs of a slave economy. Whereas enslaved people were not recognized as human beings, but as property that could be mortgaged, traded, bought, sold, used as collateral, given as a gift, and disposed of violently. Whereas liberty was the inalienable right of the people who would be considered white, enslavement and subjugation became the natural station of people who had any discernible drop of black blood. Whereas the Supreme Court enshrined this thinking in the law in its 1857 Dred Scott decision by claiming that the Negro race was, quote, a separate class of persons, unquote, which the founders had, quote, not regarded as a portion of the people or citizens of the government, unquote. Whereas President Lincoln declared that without the institution of slavery and the colored race as a basis, the war could not have an existence, and that Black people should leave the United States, quote, it is better for both of us, therefore, to be separated, unquote. Whereas W.E.B. Du Bois wrote, quote, few men ever worshiped freedom with half such unquestioning faith as did the American Negro for 2 centuries, unquote. Whereas during Reconstruction, Black Americans helped pass more equitable tax legislation and laws that prohibited discrimination in public transportation, accommodation, and housing. Whereas newly freed Black people who had been prohibited from learning to read and write during slavery and were desperate for an education successfully established that most democratic of American institutions, the public school, for both Black and white children. Whereas the years directly after slavery saw the greatest expansion of human and civil rights this nation would ever see, whereas white Southerners quickly went about eradicating the gains of Reconstruction, a wave of systemic violence deployed against Black Americans after Reconstruction in both the North and the South. Whereas, despite the guarantee of equality in the 14th Amendment, the Supreme Court's landmark Plessy versus Ferguson decision in 1896 declared that racial segregation of Black Americans was, in fact, constitutional. Whereas millions of Black families migrated to the mythical promised land in the North, only to have their dream of freedom and racial uplift shattered. Whereas so many Black men served their country at a time of war, so they could be treated like citizens of the United States. Whereas the centennial of slavery's end neared, Black people were still seeking the rights they had fought for and won after the Civil War. The right to be treated equally by public institutions, which was guaranteed in 1866 with the Civil Rights Act. Whereas the Supreme Court concluded that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. Separate educational facilities are inherently unequal. Whereas democracy as we know it today has been born on the backs of Black resistance that paved the way for a second Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and the Fair Housing Act. Whereas the civil rights movement paved the way for the rights of differently abled people, women, and LGBTQ groups. Whereas music, arts, and culture are quintessentially American, are rooted in Black history. Whereas inequities in healthcare, the criminal justice system, housing, education, infant mortality rates, and environmental injustice derive from a history of oppression. And whereas on the 400th anniversary of this faithful moment in 1619, it is time to tell this story of Black Americans who contributed to building this nation and of who we are. We, the South Bend Community School Corporation Board of School Trustees, proclaim on this day that we urge teachers to share this history with students and help students, their families, and the South Bend community understand Black Americans' contribution to our nations and the global economy, political system, agriculture, industry, public education, social justice, law, and the performing and visual arts, music, and literature. Attested to this day, June 15th, 2020, signed C. Todd Cummings, Superintendent, John Anella, School Board President.
Thank you, Dr. Green. And now I'd like to announce some student scholarships. So first, from Washington High School, Joali Figuera won the Home Builders Association of St. Joseph Valley. It's a newly created scholarship titled the Skilled Trade Leadership Award. And not only is Joali a Golden Hammer Award winner from the Construction Technology Program, she maintained a 3.9 GPA, completed 15 college credits from Ivy Tech, holds multiple certifications from the National Center for Construction, Education, and Research, and the Home Builders Institute. She plans a career in carpentry and electrical trade. So congratulations to Joali. We are very, very proud of her. Next, I would like to announce the TCU Superintendent Scholarship winner. Tanya Gonzalez is the winner of the $5,000 payment from the South Bend Alumni Association. She's attending Bethel University, majoring in business management. She will graduate coming up on July 24th from Adams High School with the 3.92 GPA with summa cum laude designation. So Tanya, we are very proud of you as well. I also wanted to take a moment and just say thank you to George Jones, Brandon White, Gabby Hernandez, and everyone who came out and celebrated our seniors who are leaving for the military. Thank you to our board members who were there, Ms. Wesley who spoke. It was a terrific ceremony. It was colorful, and it was a really terrific way to honor our seniors who were leaving for the military. And we're also very grateful to them for their service and their families for allowing them to serve. And next, we received notice last week that the Indiana State School Board Association has announced individual and board winners for the Exemplary Governance Awards Program. These individual school board members and collective school boards have shown extensive dedication to their professional development by attending ISBA and other sanctioned events throughout the year. So two of our Exemplary Governance Award winners are 3rd District Trustee, Ms. Leslie Wesley, congratulations, and at-large trustee, Mr. Rudy Monterosa. Congratulations to you both.
Well done.
Thank you.
And Mr. Anello, that's the end of recognitions.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Cummings, and back to you for superintendent announcements.
So for superintendent announcements, thank you, Mr. Anello. We would like to encourage everyone who is in middle school to make sure that you sign up for 21st Century Scholars before the June 30 deadline. 21st Century Scholars grants a graduate from high school, if you sign up in time, a full and free tuition reimbursed college education at any public, any Indiana institution. I, from my English teaching days, just had a student finish his MBA at IU who was a 21st century scholar all those years ago, earned his bachelor's degree, and then went on to earn his MBA from 21st century scholars. So make sure you check with your principals and check with your counselors before your 8th grade year. Please make sure you sign up for 21st century scholars. We'd like to say thank you to the Kroc Center for celebrating our food and nutrition services program by honoring National Donut Day for them. We have submitted an end of the year survey, parents, teachers, and students. We would like your input on how last year went, and we would like your input going forward as we make plans to reopen school in light of COVID-19. So please take the time to answer these survey questions. And then finally, the Alumni Association's annual golf outing will be July 23rd at 9 a.m. So if you'd like to play golf that day and raise money for the Alumni Association, which funds our extracurricular events, please go to their website and sign up for the 23rd. That's the end of superintendent announcements. Mr. Anella?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Cummings. Now we're on to academic focus. We have a presentation on the master compliance plan regarding the 1980 consent decree.
Yes, thank you. Give me 1 second to share my screen. Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Anella. So I'm proud as superintendent to be giving this presentation this evening. Number one, we are here because we have missed deadlines. And we're here tonight to announce our formal plan of how we're going to meet the deadlines and how we're going to move forward. But we wouldn't be here tonight without a lot of help from a lot of people. And I specifically want to say thank you to Ms. Olitha Jones and Dr. Stuart Green for their help in getting us to the master compliance document. And like I said, we wouldn't be here had the district not missed deadlines. And I'm here to take full responsibility for those. I'm here to say that we're going to meet these deadlines and that we're going to use the master compliance plan in order to do that. So what is the consent decree? So the consent decree was ordered by federal court in the 1980s to reduce segregated schools in South Bend. It also included a provision that African-American students could not be more harshly disciplined than other students. And so we have some timelines there. And I know, Ms. Jones, I want to thank you for your activism all those years ago and your early work with the consent decree. We received a stipulation in 2018 after we had filed Focus 2018 because we had said we were going to do some things and then we missed the deadlines. So in 2018, in relation to Focus 2018, the DOJ identified desperate discipline of African-American students as a serious community issue. They said that we needed to use a multi-tiered system of support in response to those discipline issues. We presented a plan in order to do that. The federal court approved our plan and approved the stipulation in 2018. The details that we would uniformly use the student code of conduct, that we would provide training and resources, we would teach socio-emotional skills to our students, we would implement RTI strategies, we would offer multiple sessions and community engagement to gain input on the district's code of conduct, and that we would create data mechanisms that we would monitor the implementation of code of conduct through data warehouse and other data implementation systems. The deadline was the end of the 2018-2019 school year. Like I've said twice now, the district missed those deadlines. We failed to implement the code of conduct in all schools equitably. We implemented in a plan, but failed to implement at the building level MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support throughout every school. And we failed to revise the code of conduct before 2019, and we failed at training our employees. So what do we do moving forward? Well, before we do that, this is Focus 2019. In Focus 2019, we right-sized the district, and we said we were going to do a few things in Focus 2019. We were going to have new grade configurations, we were going to have new bell times, and we were going to right size the district, and we were going to have a new student assignment plan. This is what the master compliance agreement looks like that we will submit to the DOJ. These are examples of what we say we're going to do, who is responsible, and the date that those items are to be completed by. So what's the purpose of tonight's presentation on the master compliance plan? It's to support and request extended deadlines of meeting the 2018 stipulation. It's to establish clear steps and a clear timeline to meet the amended stipulation. It's to provide transparency and specifically accountability in meeting the compliance efforts. And I believe most importantly, it's to create a structure to implement and to monitor the compliance efforts. So the proposed order for the federal court will include training on code of conduct and uniform implementation in all of our buildings. That work has already started. It will create an oversight of a board committee that will monitor how my team and I implement and work to implement the strategies of the master compliance plan, develop a district framework and protocol for CRPBIS, culturally relevant positive behavior intervention support. We will have community engagement on the code of conduct. We will make revisions based on stakeholder, principal, and community input to the code of conduct. And we will develop school-based teams to monitor the implementation of the code of conduct. I think one thing, and Dr. Green was mentioning it in an earlier meeting, this is not just about me and my team at the district level monitoring our data and a code of conduct. This is a district-wide system with a feedback loop that connects connects the board to the central office, to schools, teachers, and how they are using discipline in their classroom. And the data that we gather creates the feedback loop of the master compliance plan and the framework that we need to develop. What is the structure of the master compliance plan? It's broken down by goals, objectives, and very specific tasks. Each goal includes an overview and a rationale, specific measures of success, and specific objectives. What we've added to this that was not in the 2018 stipulation is we've added specific names of who's responsible. No more finger pointing, no more saying we missed this, they're no longer with the district. These are the folks that are responsible. The specific deadline and the ongoing status of the task and the objective. What are the goals? So the first goal is to uniformly implement current student code of conduct across all of our schools, eliminate alternatives to the code of conduct. We will uniformly utilize the code of conduct in every building. No more multiple handbooks, no more different ways of doing discipline per building. The code of conduct will govern how we work throughout the district. We've already begun this work training school level administrative staff, training teachers and other certified staff, and finally, training non-certified staff who interact with our students.
All of you lose. Did we lose Todd? Dr. Cummings?
Goal 2, establish a system of, I'm sorry, did someone have a question? I'm sorry.
We lost you for a minute, but you're back.
Oh,
Okay, keep going.
perfect. Did we lose the good part? Because I can do the good part again. I mean, hopefully, you know.
Let's do the good
Isn't
part
it all a
again.
good part? Go ahead. I mean,
Go on.
we lost about 30 seconds or so.
Okay, I believe what I said was that it would be the DSLs who would be responsible, and the DSLs are simply a name change from the ILDs, not a new position. Goal 2 is to establish a system of assessment, support, and accountability to assure staff is using the code of conduct. So we'll develop, along with our accountability office, mechanisms to track and analyze discipline referrals. Each school will have a data review process. Like I said earlier, the feedback loop from the board down to schools, what that data review process looks like. We'll conduct semester reviews to identify our discipline trends, And then we will establish assessment, support, and a very clear accountability system. This is the work driven by DSLs and the Chief Accountability Officer. Goal 3 is to establish an internal accountability system that creates an organizational structure for district level monitoring of compliance with a consent decree. So this places oversight, like I mentioned earlier, in a superintendent board committee. It builds responsibility for aspects of compliance into the DSL job descriptions, which have already been board approved and already have code of conduct in them. It creates a compliance coordinator position. And that is a position that we will be working on for compliance all across the district, not just with the master compliance plan, but there are other issues in the district that compliance needs to be monitored. And it adds compliance and components of it into principals evaluation. This work will primarily be driven by the superintendent, chief academic officer, and with input from HR. And finally, goal 4, provide training, resources, and support to teach school rules, socio-emotional skills, reinforce positive behavior at all times, and implement other strategies and strategically align our resources to promote positive school climates. So we'll develop a district framework and protocol for a tiered system of support. We'll develop and deliver an SEL curriculum, which Dr. Tessa Sutton, our Chief Equity Officer, and her team and a group of teachers are already working on. We'll develop staff to engage in tier support and CRPBIS. We'll create community partnerships in support of the district's MTSS efforts, and we'll create a plan to implement MTSS district-wide. And this work will be driven by our equity department with funding from the CARES grant and support from our DSLs. Goal 5, review and make revisions to the student code of conduct, including initial revisions based on community and stakeholder feedback. We'll communicate with the community about our implementation efforts and our student discipline data. We'll gather information from the community. We'll gather information from our stakeholders and teachers, and we'll analyze the data and make recommendations in revising the code of conduct. And we'll establish an ongoing review and revision process for the code of conduct that includes regular input from community members. And this will be driven by myself and a working group that we have established. The one final thing I want to say is that the master compliance plan is not only approved this evening, but it'll be a document that needs to be updated and revised based on our experience, based on our system production, based on the data we get, based on our community input, and based on our experience and the identified needs that we have. And as a superintendent, I apologize that we've gotten to this point. The district did not meet their deadlines, but I'm looking forward that the board, should the board choose to approve our master compliance plan, we can get this piece back on track and we can do what's right for our students in terms of student discipline and student access to the code of conduct. Any questions or comments?
Thank you, Dr. Cummings, for all the work and for also taking responsibility for our years of failings in this department. I'm assuming other board members have questions or comments for you.
Yes, Dr. Cummings, thank you very much. Your presentation and explanation really simplifies the document that we've been given. Some of the feedback that I've gotten is that it was pretty lengthy and the average person probably wouldn't be able to follow it, but your presentation does simplify that to make it easier to understand. I would be interested to know, I don't believe I heard you use the term non-discrimination. I do know that that's language that the Department of Justice used to describe the committee, your committee that I believe Dr. Stewart is on, I'm on, and Ms. Wesley. So can you explain or just give a little detail on the non-discrimination? You know, we hear a lot about socio-emotional, but we don't hear too much about professional development as it relates to non-discrimination.
That is a really good point. Thank you, Ms. Jones, and thank you for your leadership for all these years, even going back to the 80s and the early consent decree. So we're working now with our DSLs, and we're working with DSLs and principals on how we train our principals and our teachers. And we do believe that bias training is a part of that we need, not just for teachers and principals, but corporation-wide. So we committed first that we were going to train our principals and in the code of conduct. And so as we look at how we unroll professional development this summer and throughout the year, that training on non-discrimination will be part of how we do that.
Okay, thank you. And I'm willing to vote for this evening on the condition that what you just stated is implemented and added to the document, because we do know that this document is going to be fluid. The Justice Department understands that things will change. There might be some alterations, things that will need to change. So I would like for that language to be in the document.
Thank you. I will make sure we make those changes, and I'll commit to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Anyone else?
Mr. Anella.
Yes, Dr. Warren.
So thank you, Dr. Cummings. I've been particularly frustrated by the lack of progress on the student code of conduct. So I appreciate the specificity of this document and the the fact that the accountability has more detail. Goal 3, the internal accountability, places the consent decree on your org chart and creates a compliance coordinator. So we don't get into the position of saying who's supposed to be doing this. So, and this is where we've fallen down in the past. And in addition to that, goal 5, which is the external accountability. And I think what's really on my mind now is after we passed the referendum, I've received several comments from people in the community that said, all right, you know, we gave you this money, now we want to see some results. And so this goal 5 of board review and community review, I think is really important. I do have a question on goal 1. So objective A was to eliminate the alternatives to the code of conduct, and that principals were contacted to determine if there were any alternatives. And then point 6, a directive was issued to use the code of conduct and not any alternatives. So can you tell me, without naming schools, because I'm not interested in that, but what's the scope of the tightening up? In other words, how many schools had to be reviewed or encouraged to not have their own discipline codes of conduct?
I would say I'm looking to make sure I get the numbers right. And while I don't want to call anyone out specifically, under 5 that needed to be tightened up. Now, with that, we did want to do a thorough review. We want to make sure that what happens at school, A elementary, A middle, A high, is the same thing that happens at B elementary, B middle, and B high. And so we want to do a pretty thorough review of that, but at the moment, about under 5.
Well, I was just trying to understand how difficult it was to get people to a uniform place. So it sounds like they were outliers.
And if I could take this moment, I forgot that to mention, I want to say thank you to Ms. Wesley, our 3rd district, trustee, that the oversight of this with Ms. Jones and Dr. Green setting as committee members will move to the African American Expulsion and Suspension Committee. And so there's a broad group of stakeholders. It holds the superintendent accountable for making sure that the master compliance plan is done, is timely, and is back on track. So I did at least want to add that. Did I answer all your questions, Dr. Warren?
You did, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Warren. And Dr. Warren did bring up one point that has come up since June 2nd, is that we don't get any of the money until next year. And so just so when people ask, we are not spending any of that money at this time.
I have something to add also.
Yes, Ms. Leslie.
Again, thank you, Dr. Cummings, for addressing and taking accountability. It says much of a leader that can take accountability when they haven't been involved in the ongoing process. But I want to make get understanding that the equity office, from my notes from our committee, that the equity office is planning the equity, diversity, and inclusive training, inclusion training for teachers and other staff, and professional development. And also, they're also doing an equity audit. So I want to make sure that that is included on the record. And I know that, yes, out of the equity office. So I want to make sure the public is understanding that that office is taking the charge of making sure that they're doing equity, diversity, and inclusion training for teachers and staff and administration, and also professional development, as well as an equity audit. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Wesley. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Monterosa.
Thank you, Dr. Cummings. I just wanted to be able to express my appreciation for, quite frankly, taking the bull by the horns and taking some very affirmative, clear steps forward. And I also wanted to share that I appreciate the fact that we have listed these responsibilities as I look through the master compliance plan, that we had listed these responsibility under roles as opposed to names of individuals, but specific roles, so that we always have somebody who's responsible for that specific section of the plan. So I think that was very important. I like the way that was presented. I think that it's important that we continue to take this plan seriously and that the district prioritize compliance, not only so that we're in compliance with what the court had ordered per the terms of the consent decree, but quite frankly, because if we are able to be in compliance, we're doing what's best for our district and more importantly, what's best for our students. The question I had, Dr. Cummings, was how will this work out with the schools that are a part of the empowerment zone?
Excellent question. The empowerment zone is still part of the consent decree. I'm looking to make sure I'm answering this question right. Yes. So they are still part of the consent decree. And so we've included them in our conversations, and they have their pieces of what they have to do for the master compliance plan as well. But they are part of the master compliance plan and the consent decree and have been involved in those conversations. That's an excellent question.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Monterosa. Anyone else? Okay.
Mr. Renell, while I have the floor, may I add a thing or two?
Yes, you may.
So while I still have the floor and before you all move on to your consent agenda, I just want to mention a couple of things. Number one, tonight on our consent agenda is our resignation of our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Susan Devetsky. And I just wanted to take the moment to thank her. I wanted to thank her for her work in literacy, the development of the French immersion program, her commitment to early childhood and pre-K, and the fact that she's been a really wonderful co-worker with a great sense of humor. We've enjoyed working with her this year, and she's been a great part of our team. And so I didn't want the consent agenda to be approved without thanking Dr. Devetsky for her service, and we wish her all the best in her next steps. And with Dr. Warren's earlier comments and concerning the referendum, and adding on to Mr. Renell's comment about we don't get our money for a whole year. Tonight, there are 3 title changes in the consent agenda. Mr. Rene Sanchez is, I'm asking that we change his title to the Assistant Superintendent of Operations. Mr. Rafi Nolan Abrahamian asking that we change his title to Assistant Superintendent of Accountability and Innovation. And Dr. Tessa Sutton changing her title to Assistant Superintendent of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. These are title changes, more responsibility, no new money. No one is getting any more money out of this change. What this gives us the ability to do as I get ready to begin my second year is to laser focus the district so that structurally we are prepared to tackle literacy, that we are prepared to make good on the promises that we said we were going to do. And so tonight will simply be title changes with more responsibility added to folks. Next step, we will work internally, shifting folks around under them. And then I would like to come back in July with a fully articulated organizational chart so that the board and the community know how the organizational chart has changed from the one that's currently on the website. So we'll make some other internal moves. And then in July, I'd like to bring back a fully articulated org chart for the board to approve. Thank you, Mr. Anella.
Thank you, Dr. Cummings. That sounds great. And we look forward to the updated org chart. We're still at academic focus. So now we're on to transportation update 7.02. Is that Mr. Sanchez?
Yes, it is.
Okay. The floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Cummings, President Nella, board members. We are here tonight to give you an update on transportation, some of the things that we're planning on doing the rest of the summer as we prepare to go into the new year. So let me see if I can share my screen. Okay. Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Yes. Yep.
Can you see it? Also with me on the line or over the internet, I have with me our operations supervisor, Latoya King, our routing supervisor, Jerry Anderson, and our supervisor, kind of jack of all trades, Patrick Shelton. So as we go through the presentation, if you have specific questions, please feel free to ask us to answer the questions. So the first, as you can see, we're already planning on working with the students that we have in our system so that way we can make sure that whatever the situation is when we start the school year next year, that we are ready to go with our routes. So we're working with the technology department to ensure that we are going to have the most up-to-date data so that way we can work with students in their next grade level or their next school. We are planning to get our routes completed almost 3 weeks earlier than we normally do, so that way we can provide the information to both the drivers, the paraprofessionals, and the parents early on. We'd like to get our information out to the parents by July 24th so that they have plenty of time to call us, email us, let us know that if there's something wrong or maybe their address has changed or they're going to a different school. The other thing that we're planning on doing this year is making sure that we provide enough time for every driver to drive their route beforehand. So one, not only will they be able to bid, they will also be able to drive their route, and then they will be able to individually meet with their routers so that they can provide suggestions to the routers so that they can streamline the particular driving style that they will have for that route. And then August 11th, we roll right into school. So in order to become more efficient, we are working to combine morning routes with midday routes or afternoon routes with midday routes, trying to find the cost benefit analysis for that so that way we have the ability to have drivers already on a campus to transport students, whether they have to leave the campus for a CTE route or a special education route or something else like that, so that way drivers aren't having to drive across town in order to pick up students at one school and then deliver them to a different school. Number two, we are adding card scanners to buses to assist with student load, Medicare reimbursement, and potential contact tracing. As we talk a little bit more about COVID-19, the card scanners are something that we talked about last year, so that way we could make sure that parents know where their students are and that the central office of the VMF knows how many students are riding a bus on a daily basis. Number three, we are expanding our work with Transpo to see how they can accommodate even more high school students on their routes. It was a very successful program this past year where more of our students were taking advantage of the free transportation around the city in order to get to and from school. We're hoping to expand that with additional students riding with Transpo. And then number 4, we are adding the purchase of some shuttle buses so as to ease the strain on the big yellow buses, so that way teams, athletic teams or academic teams, CTE students, homeless and foster students, and special education students and their programs will be able to access transportation on an easier and more cost-efficient scale. So with regard to COVID-19, like everybody else in the district, we're going to be following the guidelines that are recommended to us. We have a seat at the table on the Future Crisis Committee, so we are providing feedback regarding transportation. One of the things that we've been talking about is, especially if we have to reduce the number of students on some of our buses, is that we will likely have to add additional buses for some of our large apartment complexes that we have, where in some cases we will have 45 students or so get on at just one location. So we want to make sure that we're providing enough social distancing for those students. In examining what the IDOE is telling us, we will make sure that we will provide masks, gloves, safety glasses, and cleaner. However, some information came out recently that it would be unlikely for us to provide hand sanitizer, bulk hand sanitizer, because it's a flammable hazard. This is another reason why we want to make sure that our drivers have the opportunity to drive their routes before the school year starts, is because they're going to be driving with this a lot more gear on, in the sense that they will have PPE. So the IDOE is recommending that we allow for extra time, given that the drivers have to get used to driving with the PPE on. And then one of the last things that we received some guidance on is, as you are familiar with going to the grocery store or other places, that they have put up plexiglass between the customer and the person who is ringing you up on the cash register. We asked the question, is it possible to add either plexiglass or a clear screen or curtain behind the driver? And as right now, the rules say that it's possible, but IDOE has yet to clear it. So if that's something that we're going to be interested in doing, we're going to have to request a specific permission from the IDOE to let us do that. And then in order to make sure that we are providing the people of South Bend and their students and the parents to come talk to us, we want to find out more of what's on their mind and how we could be of assistance this coming school year. Is we are joining Dr. Cummings for 2 of his talks with Todd in July, and we will be available to speak about the upcoming school year. And those dates are as followed: July 14th and July 28th. And so we always thank you for your support. We know that our staff is usually the first educator that the students see in the morning, and they're frequently the last educator that the students see at the end of the day. So we know that you support us, and we're very thankful for that support. And at this time, we will take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Appreciate all your work in transportation. One small item that always seemed to be just common sense has been letting the drivers drive more before their first day of school. So thank you, just so they know the route. And then secondly, have we had any other conversations around Transpo partnership for a more extensive busing of high school students?
Yes, I've met with Transpo on several occasions, and we are scheduled again to meet this week, so that way we can find out if they have the capacity for taking more students as we expand into this year. If we wanted to add more routes, that would be something that we would have to pick up the cost for, and we will have to talk about what is going to be allowed, how close people are going to be allowed on the buses, as we will we may have to provide the masks for the students to ride on the buses if masks are required.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Yes, Ms. Wall?
Thank you, Chair Nulla. Mr. Sanchez, I was just curious as to, have there been discussions with Transpo about route modifications, not necessarily adding new routes, but if we could provide Transpo with the demographics of, kind of population demographics of where our students live and the closest routes to them, if we were able to find a correlation between there's a dense population of students, but if this route could be altered by, I don't know, 3.5 blocks or 4 blocks or something, it would make ridership potentially increase by our students. So has there been any conversations in regards to just slight route modifications that just might enable students to be closer to the routes that are already established?
So we haven't had those specific conversations. We have had conversations about extending their routes into the Clay area. However, that would take a lot of discussions at the city level, at the county level, for that to take place. But what I can do is I can work with our with our routers and also with our demographics here and find out if there are additional places that we could, if the bus were to go into the neighborhood on a viable side street, could they pick up even more students? So I will definitely make note of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Wesley?
I'd just like to say that Mr. Sanchez, I'd just like to say a special thank you to your transportation department, especially during this, the COVID-19, being out with the Wi-Fi, that just hats off to them, those drivers that have been actively involved during this time that we've been off. And it will not go unnoticed, again, to tell them, please let the bus drivers know that we truly, truly do appreciate them very, very much, because I know it warms my heart to see those Wi-Fi buses out, and also seeing the bus drivers even assist with the nutrition. So a special thank you to you and Mrs. King, Mr. Shelton, Mrs. Anderson, everyone that's in the supervision position out at the transportation department. I just want to make sure that we're very clear in making sure that we're able to give the families enough notice, Mr. Sanchez, enough notice of what the final route schedules are going to look like, so that everybody can make adjustments, especially for those students that have to get right on Transpo or the partnership that we have, that we at least give the families enough time before whatever we decide of how our new start date is going to look like, because we don't know. And I know we're kind of up in the air, but at least if we can keep communicating or be able to utilize all of our social media outlets to make sure that parents are aware of any changes that are going on in the transportation department, or if anything that they need to know, if we can communicate that out, I would really gladly appreciate that.
Thank you, Ms. Wesley. Any other questions, comments? Yes, Mr. Monterosa.
I wanted to echo what Ms. Wesley had mentioned, Mr. Sanchez. First, I'm very impressed with the presentation that you had made. I'm glad that we're taking steps to make sure that we continue to improve in the transportation department. But just to, I guess, echo again what Ms. Wesley had indicated, that I believe the really important factor here is to be able to have that communication with parents and with the community, and to be able to respond, which I know that you have, at least what we've seen throughout this past year. Because I believe so long as we have the parents informed of what we're planning on doing, and this certainly is one of those steps, then I think that we can have a better outcome with regard to transportation. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is I'm struck by your comment that you had indicated that when the student first gets to the first contact that they have with the corporation is this educator, that's the bus driver. My experience with our bus drivers is that they do care about the students, that they almost take this parental figure, and I think they take that responsibility seriously. So I absolutely agree with you that these are individuals that are part of our community that care about our students. And so I thank them for taking that care, and I thank you for taking that leadership and recognizing that they are also a very important part of what we do with the corporation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Monterosa. Anyone else?
Mr. Anella.
Yes, Dr. Warren.
In the vein of informing parents and communicating in a timely way, we had talked earlier when you were here about any discussions we had about start times. Could you clarify that, please?
So we did some investigation and has had a few conversations about start times with various principals, but we're not going to move forward with the start times at this time.
Thank you. I just wanted to get that out there.
With a change of start times.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Warren. Dr. Green?
Yeah, I applaud all the efforts that you're making to make this more efficient. And to echo some of my colleagues, I think one of the important things to recognize in the corporation, especially through an equity lens, is that the drivers are part of the corporation as educators. And I wonder about, our efforts to make sure that their voices are heard and that they can tell us how things are going, especially with the routes and with the kids. I think Mr. Monterosa is right. They are warm-hearted individuals who care deeply about our students. But I want to know if some efforts have been made as well to include them in the conversations that we're having. So, for example, I think we're making some bold moves to try to create equity in the corporation, to incorporate just and fair practices in the ways in which we're treating students. We've talked about implicit bias. We've talked about code of conduct, cultural PBIS, as well as restorative practices. Is there an effort? I guess underlying my question is also my hope. I wonder if we can be more inclusive of the drivers to allow them to be part of these broader conversations to understand the directions that the corporation is moving in.
So thank you for the question, because that is actually something that we had planned going back all the way to January, and we had already booked a 2-day session for our drivers, where the first day they were going to get, well, half of them would get their regular trainings that required by the IDOE, and then the second day was going to be PBIS and restorative justice. So that because they're educators, as I mentioned earlier, they should be getting the same kind of training that our other educators are getting as well. And so it's going to be important for this year. If you go back to that first slide, you'll see that the training has been limited to 1 day, but I'm going to train folks about 50 at a time. So I should be able, aside from the IDOE required trainings, we should be able to provide at least an introduction to the topics that our teachers and campus folks are being introduced to or continuing this year, so that way they are aware of it as they drive their buses for these students every day.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Green. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no further comments or questions. Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Appreciate all the work you and everyone in transportation does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our academic focus. And now we have hearing of visitors on action agenda items. Mr. Monterosa, do we have anyone signed up?
Not at this time, Mr. Noah.
Okay. And that moves us on to the consent agenda, 9.01 through 9.06. It's recommended that the Board of School Trustees approve the consent agenda, which includes accepting any attached financial reports and statements under item 9.01, approving any attached consolidated registers of claims and distributions of payroll for payment under item 9.02, approving personnel decisions listed on any attached reports under item 9.03, adopting any attached resolutions under item 9.04, which are required to be adopted annually, which there are none. Accepting any gifts to the corporation and approving any fundraisers described in any attached reports under item 9.05, and approving or ratifying any contracts for $50,000 or less listed under item 9.06. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Ball
Second.
and seconded by Ms. Jones. Okay, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
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 All those against? Okay, we've approved the consent agenda, and then that moves us on to the action items. 10.01 is recommended that the Board of School Trustees approve the master compliance plan and authorize the superintendent to revise the plan as necessary to assure that goals in the plan are met or to comply with any applicable court orders. Do we have a motion to approve 10.01?
So move.
Moved by Ms. Wesley
Second.
and seconded by Mr. Monterosa. Any discussion on the master compliance plan, which we covered earlier? Yes, Ms. Ball?
The only comment that I have in the reading of this action item as it was stated is that I actually, as a board member, would like to know if any changes are going to be made by the superintendent. I think we just stated to allow changes, but I'd like to be apprised of any. I don't want to say so. I would want to be apprised of changes since this is so detailed, and it's a great outline. But yeah, that would be my only tweak to what we just presented.
I agree.
Dr. Cummings, do you have anything to add to that request?
I think that sounds fair. I will commit to that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ball. Any other questions, comments? Yes, Mr. Monterosa.
Mr. Nella, I stand corrected. I did find under the board comments website, or excuse me, email, that there were some comments on the action agenda items. I was under the impression that they were for hearing of visitors at the end.
That's okay.
So
Is that for this item?
Yes.
You know what? Why don't you go ahead and read it then, if it's especially for this item?
Yes. So it was a public commentary on action items, June 16, 2020, action item 10.01, approval of the master compliance plan. This is from Linda Wolfson, who resides at 809 Park Avenue in South Bend, Indiana. However it came to be, I applaud the development of a master compliance plan that expresses a commitment to address a long-standing problem with the South Bend Community School Corporation. The existence of disparity in discipline practices within our corporation has been well documented. Significant community pressure for change has been demonstrated. Organizations, including CAFE, the Community Action for Education, and the NAACP, organized multiple well-attended forums about the disproportionate suspensions of Black students. The United States Justice Department has recognized the problem and ordered it to end. I'd like to suggest one change that should be made before this document is submitted to the Justice Department. Goal 1 is the intention to, quote, uniformly implement current student code of conduct across all of SBCSE schools, end quote. The plan indicates that this will be done in 2 stages. First, the technical implementation of the code of conduct, and then developing cultural competency among the district's administrators. I contend that this approach is incorrect and that these 2 stages should be concurrent. The development of cultural competence among educational leaders is not an act, but a process. It is a necessary component of the successful implementation of the code of conduct whenever children and teachers return to school in the fall. I strongly agree with the statement included under Goal 4 that recognizes disparities in student discipline cannot be eliminated without providing training, resources, and support in establishing cultural competency among district staff to address implicit bias, which the district believes contributes to disproportionality in discipline, end quote. That was the final comment with regard to public the public comments under action item 10.01.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Any other discussion under 10.01? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of approving 10.01, approval of master compliance plans, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against? Okay, we have approved the master compliance plan. 10.02, It is recommended the Board of School Trustees approve the Chartwells renewal contract. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
I got moved by Dr. Green
Second.
and second by Ms. Ball. Any discussion regarding the Chartwells renewal? Dr. Cummings, why don't you discuss this a little bit?
Thank you, Mr. Nell. I believe I'm going to hand it to Ms. Fowler, who has worked extraordinarily hard on this contract and making sure that our needs are met. Ms. Fowler?
Thing. One moment.
Ms. Fowler, point of information, Mr. Anella.
Yes.
There was one comment, I believe that once, if I have an opportunity to read this comment from the public, again, I missed this one, if I may.
Okay.
And I imagine that the questions will therefore then be answered by Ms. Fowler afterwards.
Okay.
My name is Trina Robinson, president of Cafe, residing at 1021 Irvington. I am concerned about the approval of the Chartwells renewal contract. I am concerned that the corporation is outsourcing a service without doing a feasibility study, or perhaps one was completed and the community was not made aware of the outcome. Questions I have are, number one, how many employees did Chartwell retain that were previously employed by the corporation, and how many that were retained have now been let go? Number two, has a survey been conducted as to whether or not switching to Chartwell has been beneficial? Number three, has there been any complaints of shortages of food or students not being fed, or whether the students prefer to go hungry rather than to eat the food prepared by Chartwell? Number four, has there been a return to the district's food and nutrition account in the amount of $2.6 million that was guaranteed by Chartwell? Also, was the extra money used to upgrade school cafeterias and support other expanded offerings for students, as reported in the South Bend Tribune dated September 13th, 2019? 5, has the corporation considered returning the food service back in-house? If no, why not? 6, what has the cost savings been from switching to Chartwell versus in-house? 7, with the renewal of the contract, will the corporation continue to pay Chartwell $550,000 annually, or does this renewal come with an increase? And in closing, since it appears the corporation has tested the waters with privatizing our food service, will the bus system be next? And that was all the comments for the action items, Mr. President.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Monterosso, and those were very good questions. Ms. Fowler?
Hi, thank you all. Good evening, board members. Should I start with the questions or start with the presentation?
You can do it however you want. The floor is yours.
I guess I'll start with the questions really quickly and just get those out the way. From what I heard is, have there been a feasibility study? Somewhat, but it's been internal. So we've had 2 surveys conducted. It has not been there's not been a public survey. However, we have added our food and nutrition information to our overall surveys that have gone out from the district. And so we're asking them very specific questions about food and nutrition and what they want to see and how we can do things better. Internally, yes, at every month we meet and we go over exactly what is in the contract and what is supposed to happen and how they're doing. I have a small presentation. It's like 4 pages, and it will sum up what we've been doing and what we plan on doing going forward. I will say that the student participation is up 6% with Chartwells. We will not meet our $2.6 million savings, and that's because of COVID. However, the way the district have been able to pivot during COVID and feed the amount of kids that we've been able to feed with our school buildings closed, we've been able to do that because of Chartwells. They have been very flexible. To date, we have fed about 625,000 meals. And we've worked with them and some of our partners, Cultivate, and then another bigger group of the Northern Indiana, to make sure that families overall have been fed during this time. And we could not have done that work without them. They've been instrumental. So the savings at this point is about $1 million. And most of that is due to the fact of COVID-19. Before, we were serving 17,000 meals a day. We went from 17,000 meals a day to 5,000 meals a day. So that's what has affected our numbers to date. However, Had we not had the experience from COVID-19, I believe that we were on track to, for the $2.6 million to materialize. In terms of employees, we kept all of our employees. We did not, when we went into the contract with Chartwells, the board was adamant, Superintendent Cummings and the board was adamant. They understand what the corporation does for the community in terms of jobs. They were adamant about keeping all of our employees. So all of our employees, they are not Chartwells employees, they are employees of the corporation. One of the things that has happened with Chartwells is that we've saved a lot of money because we've hired more people in instead of using a temporary service. Before, we were using the temporary service, and I would say about 110 of our employees were from Express. They were not South Bend School employees. We have since then onboarded about over 60 employees, which has saved us a lot of money. And those are employees that are employees of the district. In turn, that's helping the community. So I hope I have answered all your questions. If you have anything else, we can follow up by email, and I can go through the presentation.
Ms. Fowler, I have a question. The comment asked about, so what do we plan to do with the savings from the contract? You know, are we upgrading facilities? Or so at this point, if we're saving $1 million this year and hopefully more in the future, what do we plan to do with that additional savings?
Upgrade all of our cafeterias. Upgrade, and we started some of that, but upgrade some of our cafeterias and really look at the money and see how we can be more efficient. Is there ways to pay some of our, and be innovative? Are there ways to pay some of our custodians that tend directly to food and nutrition out of that budget versus it coming out of the general fund? So we are being innovative and looking at our spends and hoping to upgrade all of our cafeterias. And we've started some of that work already. Great.
And one other item, and I'll speak for myself and my colleagues may concur, but I'd really like to see us be able to also increase the wages for our food service workers. If we're saving all that money, having that plowed back into increasing, giving them a living wage.
I can share my screen with you all really quickly. Thank you. And I'll go through this really quickly. So these are the Chartwell employees. So this is the staff that is employed by Chartwells. And right now we have about 116 employees. So these are the only employees, and this is the administrative staff that is employed by Chartwells. The rest of the employees are South Bend School employees. So starting out, some of the key highlights, true reaction. So action plans and solutions implemented on day one was the fresh food, scratch cooking in all of the facilities, a menu expansion, and the water hydration stations. Transforming and opening schools. So in October, we launched Chartwells, and there was a team of 45 people here. We had a 3-day training for all of our staff on safety and protocols. And then we had satellite conversion in 19 kitchens. So a lot of our food was cooked in one place, and then that food was taken to other facilities. And so we started making that food from scratch in the individual facilities, fresh for our students. Winter break training. We want to help change the culture in food and nutrition with the employees that are there. So we started a program to incentivize them, and it's a Gold Star Initiative. And so these are just some of the highlights. So this is a list of what we've been doing. So one of the things is that we are the only district that have are serving our students when school's out. So we served meals during spring break, during winter break, and this was all before COVID. President's Day, MLK, and any day that there's no school in session. During COVID-19, up until the last day of school, we served 577,313 meals. And then the summer program started. We had an interim program just to keep the corporation going because we understand the current position due to COVID. And we want to keep a program going before the summer program was to launch. The summer program actually just launched yesterday, or today actually. And some of the key accomplishments, we launched the NutriSlice system, which is an app where kids can order their food ahead of time at school. We launched Discovery Kitchen, audit performance, and then we've been able to, during COVID, get a $35,500 grant and then another $95,000 grant from the DOD, and that's all fresh produce. We've onboarded staff to South Bend schools and reduced our temporary staffing by 60%. So moving forward, and I want to thank Dr. Cummings and Leslie Wesley, who have been very active in what they want to see going forward. We've had several sessions with Chartwells and their management, and going forward, there's a high emphasis on the hydration stations, the fresh fruits and veggie bars, high school refresh to make sure they did start to revitalize all the kitchens, but there's more work to be done. And then more work to be done with surveying and polling and focus groups with children. We did have 2 focus groups with children this year in terms of what they want to see. But we need to do more. We need to advertise better and get things out to the parents. And then also the athletic grab and go suppers. We plan to do that this year. And also it's not on here, but really want to try breakfast in the classroom. And then more training, development, and management. And then Chartwells is also really working with us on what our back to school plan looks like. And they have given us a model of 6 different options. And this is basically, this is the flyer, grab and go hydration and the new menu going forward. So this is pretty much the presentation in a nutshell. There is a memo that outlines some very specific things that the board would like to see. That was led by Ms. Leslie Wesley and Dr. Cummings. And there are about 6 or 7 bullet points. So it's expansion of the hydration stations. And so they plan on doing that at all the high schools. Expansion of the fresh fruit and veggie bars. Development and deploy new decor and marketing at all 5 high schools using district suggested vendors. Conduct quarterly surveys with secondary students and primary students and parents. Result reports and enhancement plans to be shared in conjunction with the surveys. Implement the Food and Service Associates Survey and focused communications. Implement the athletic grab and go dinner options. Deploy culture, communication, and customer service training for all management. So that is the memo of agreement that we were able to come up with a small working group. And that's where we are. And I want to thank everyone from the Chartwells team and thank you all, the board members and Dr. Todd for all your support during this time. Because most of these people, one of the things I will say, and you guys all know this, they've been on the front line the entire time, serving our district and making sure that our children get what they need during this time. So thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Fowler. And we're very aware of that. And it's so inspiring to see all the work that was done during the closure by our food and nutrition department and all the families that have been fed and all the work they've done. And just as a vote of confidence in the change to the food and nutrition department, my senior in high school who never once ate in the cafeteria was eating there by the end of before the shutdown. So the kids love it. And I've heard so many positive things about the food since it's been changed over. So it's been quite a success. So thank you. Any questions, comments from other board members?
I'd like to just say, again, thank you, Fowler, for the update on the MOU with Chartwell. And again, I just want to make sure for clarification that in the high schools that they're going to be working on the marketing decor out in the eating areas. I think you had said the kitchen.
Yes.
Yes, but in the lunchroom, the actual lunchroom.
Absolutely.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. And then I just like to say, again, special thank you to those workers, to the food nutrition workers that worked during that COVID-19 time that we were out of school. I mean, they put themselves out on the front line to make sure that our students had meals every day. And, you know, a lot of them, I were able to go to the different sites and talk with a lot of the food nutrition workers. And so I think it is very, very important that we really honor those individuals. They played a very important role during those 56 or 52 days that we were out. So again, thank you so much. And I like the fact that we're going to be working on bridging that the relationships between Chartwell and our food nutrition workers. I know it's always hard for change, and change is hard for anybody. And so we just want to make sure that we let our employees know that we care and we value them. And so it is very, very important that they continue to share with us and we engage them in this process. And so a lot of what Ms. Fowler has presented to everyone tonight is based on also talks that we've had with our nutrition workers. So thank you, Ms. Fowler.
Thank you, Ms. Wesley. Anyone else?
Mr. Anella?
Yes, Mr. Monterosa.
Okay. Ms. Fowler, I just wanted to thank you and for your presentation. The feedback I've received with regard to once we started switching over to Chartwells has been overwhelmingly positive. From what I heard from the students and like what Mr. Anella had shared, that they were excited about the meals that they were having. I believe that this area, what we were doing with regard to nutrition, much like with transportation, it was something where the South Bend School Corporation was leading. Other districts were looking at what we were doing and following. I wouldn't say following our footsteps, but at least taking us as a good example of what can be done when the need arises. And I'm specifically mentioning there were times throughout the year since we've engaged with Chartwells where our school district was closed, or we still fed students. And especially in light of the response that we did to COVID-19, I think the response that we had was tremendous. And I think that for that reason, I have been pleased with what Chartwells has been able to accomplish. And I understand what you had mentioned, that although we didn't reach that 2.6 million savings, we were on track to do so. So I just wanted to voice my support for Chartwells. I believe that what was important was that we keep those that were employed with our corporation, that we kept them still employed, that we fed a good nutritious meal to our students, and that we fed those who weren't being fed. My question for you, Ms. Fowler, if you may be able to answer, is what in the way that we are serving food to our children will be changing in light of COVID-19 and I guess the risks that are associated with that virus?
Yes. So Dr. Cummings has a future crisis team. I am a part of that team. And one of my, what I'm charged with, one of the things that I'm charged with is what food will look like when school starts back with our different scenarios. And I have, like I said, I've been working with Chartwells, and they have come up with a model of 4 different options and what those different options look like. So if we go back to school full time, they have an option for us with social distancing and all of that included, where they're going to change the signage. There's a electronic, they have a electronic system where the kids can go and get their food and how they run the lines. They also have a bus model They have a hallway model, in the classroom model, and a delivery at home model, and grab and go model. So we are looking at all those models and fleshing them all out so that whatever school looks like going back, that we're prepared. So we have been working on that, and that's Dr. Cummings. That's his big thing, and he's on us every week about our updates and where we're at, and he's adamant about us getting it right in every single area. So I appreciate him for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Monterosa. Anyone else?
This is the actual the student service model for back to school. That's what it looks like. That's one of our slides out of our future crisis team that Dr. Cummings put together.
Well, keep us on our toes, right?
Yes, yes.
Well, seeing no other questions, comments, thank you, Ms. Fowler. I appreciate all the work you've been doing, and especially the food and nutrition department. Do we have, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the Chartwells renewal, please say aye.
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 Aye. All those against? And that's passed unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Fowler. The Chartwells contract has been renewed. We're on to action agenda item 10.03. It is recommended that the Board of School Trustees approve a resolution to transfer amounts from Education Fund to Operations Fund. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Monterosa, second by Ms. Wesley. Ms. Fowler, I'm assuming you will give us some background on this agenda item?
Yes, this agenda item is really just a matter of formality. We are transferring 15% from the education to the operations fund, which is allowable by the state for state tuition payments. And this is just a process that has to happen every year because of how the state has the funding set up. And this is this happens on a reoccurring basis. So we do it twice a year. And so our plan is to do this because this is kind of a new, it's new to us, but our plan is to do the transfer in June, then again in December. So we did it last year for the first time, and this is just a matter of formality.
And is this a common practice amongst other school districts? Can you give us a little background for other board members and also the public as to why it's done?
Yes, it is. Because when the funding streams were actually changed, one of our funding buckets was taken away, and then everything went into the education fund. And so because everything's in the education fund, the funds are very restrictive. We have to do a transfer, and they allow a 15% transfer every year from the education fund to the operations fund. But with having everything in the education fund, it actually gives us more flexibility because these funds were all very restrictive. And so it gives us a little bit more flexibility, but we still have to make the one transfer. But this is common, and this is something that is basically in the bylaws for schools, and every school does this. So it's a matter of formality. And it kind of helps you keep track of, what your operational spends are.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of approving 10.03, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against? Okay, the transfer has been approved. Thank you. On to 10.04. It is recommended the Board of School Trustees approve the 2021 calendar of school board meetings. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Ms. Ball and second by Mr. Monterosa. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Dr. Cummings, are there any discussion questions on the calendar for 2021?
I would simply highlight that we've made it so that they don't back up against holidays. And so we've given folks a chance, and board members a chance to travel, to get back so that our meetings are accessible to the public. And so we encourage folks to look meetings that bump up next to holidays. We've just added some more time, made sure that they were accessible to folks, and some of those meetings will be on Wednesdays. We've also aligned it with the City County Council to make sure that we can join them, they can join us in joint meetings should we choose to have them, or we can visit them and they can visit us. So those are two highlights I would point out.
Great. That's great about the city and the council meetings. Any other questions, comments? Yes, Mr. Monterosa.
Dr. Cummings, I take it that should the board approve this calendar, that we will make it readily accessible to the public on our website?
Yes, Mr. Monterosa, as soon as should the board choose to approve, we will make it accessible to the public. We'll put it on the school board calendar. We'll put it on my calendar, and we'll make sure that folks are properly notified.
And I hope that I'm not jumping the gun, and I apologize if I am, but I know that in light of COVID that we've seen I guess how effective these virtual board meetings can be. And I believe that if we're going to continue to engage in that perhaps that calendar can have the specific website through which the public can see our meetings. I think from time to time, people, even now as we're engaged in this virtual board meeting, folks are asking where they can see it. I know that we've indicated YouTube and that we've indicated Facebook, but I wonder if we might be able to have a link on this site so that people can readily access that.
Thank you, Mr. Monterosa. I was just checking with our general counsel. And so the reason that we're currently able to have virtual meetings is because the governor has extended the emergency order to July 4. And so the Public Access Counselor is looking for ways for us to continue having virtual meetings, and we'll keep the board and the public updated on that. However, and again, I apologize for jumping the gun. I believe that the great success we've had of our virtual meetings, even if the board is in session in person, I do believe that we will continue showing and streaming our board meetings so that we can be more accessible to folks in the community.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Monterosa. Any questions, comments, anyone else? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of approving 10.04, please say aye.
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 All those against? Okay, we've approved a school board calendar for 2021. 10.05, it is recommended that the Board of School Trustees approve the letter of intent to purchase scholastic books in the amount of $172,860 to purchase school grade grab-and-go packets for SBCSC's K through 8 students. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Ball, second by Ms. Wesley. Do we have, Dr. Cummings, is there someone telling us about this, or are you going to tell us about this?
I would like to hand that to Mr. Brandon White, one of our DSLs, and he's going to talk about the books and the book acquisition and the point of the books and the.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Mr. White.
Hello. I think they'll start my video here shortly, but I am here. Just wanted to share that these books will be distributed to our kindergarten through 7th grade students. Every student will receive 5 books, and with those books, they will also receive family resources to engage with the students with those texts and those titles, as well as individual independent activities that students can do around those. This is not supposed to be something that students would turn in necessarily, but our hope is, with connection with some of the other outreach initiatives that we want to do this summer, that we can connect our students with quality academic materials for them to continue to engage and practice over the summer.
Thank you, Mr. White. And then just a quick question, where's the money coming from?
So part of this money is coming from the CARES Act money, and then also we have additional Title I carryover. So with combining those funds and being resourceful, we'll be able to provide it for all our title and non-title students.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Okay, thank you, Mr. White. Seeing no other questions or comments, all those in favor of approving 10.05, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against? Okay, we've been approved 10.05, moving on to 10.06. It is recommended that the Board of School Trustees approve student ridership card readers. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Who did I miss that? Someone.
Dr. Green.
Oh, Dr. Green. We got a second?
Second.
Oh, Miss Wesley. Okay. All right. Sorry. Sometimes it's hard with the screen. I don't hear everything. And I assume, Mr. Sanchez, you're back. So I thought you might give us a little background on this. You talked about it earlier, but you can fill us in on any other details you want us to know about.
Sure. The goal here is to provide students with an ID card that when they walk on the bus, that they are able to swipe and we're able to track them. So not only will we be able to track their ridership, but there will also be an interface where parents can see that they're getting on the buses as well. So that way they'll have an approximate time when the students will be getting home and if they got off the bus at school, et cetera. So, and in the days of COVID as well, we're also going to be able to use this data likely for contact tracing. And then also so that way, if we are providing transportation for students who are receiving special education services, we could use the data of them riding the bus to apply for Medicare reimbursement.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. And that's the My Stop app, is that correct?
Yeah, it's the same company, Versatrans, yes.
So they'll be still using that app.
Yes.
And I'll just keep my fingers crossed that the app is working, because that's sometimes people have issues with it.
Yes.
Any questions, comments for Mr. Sanchez?
Oh, I have a comment.
There we go, Ms. Ball.
It's a question. Will the swipe card be a part of the student ID, or is that going to be two different cards they're going to hold? The student ID and their bus swipe card?
So I think this first year, the students will likely have to have two separate cards until we're able to have them in time, so that way we can coordinate with the schools, so that way this particular card can be used as their ID.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ball. Mr. Sanchez, back one more question. How are we paying for this again, and how much is this? And we budgeted this some time back, correct?
Yes, the installation on 206 buses is $120,000 and $121,000, and the recurring fees yearly is about $36,000, and it's been part of our budget the entire time.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Questions, comments? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. All those in favor of approving 10.06, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against? Okay, we've approved card readers. Thank you very much. Now we're on to 10.07. It is recommended that the Board of School Trustees approve the postings and job descriptions for Coordinator of Digital Integration, Coordinator of Virtual Student and Professional Learning. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Green, seconded by Ms. Jones. I'm looking at my board docs. Is there also, it's Coordinator Digital Integration, Coordinator of Virtual Student and Professional Learning, but then there's also Data Coach, Home Liaison at Rise Up Academy, K through 12 Literacy Instructional Coach. Is that correct, Dr. Cummings?
It is. So I'm going to let Mr. Stalvey handle the digital integration job description, and then I'm going to kick the others to Mr. White. So Mr. Stalvey, who's joining us?
Yep. So the coordinator of digital integration was taking the soon to be open director of digital integration and lowering that down to a coordinator position to work closely with Mr. White's job descriptions that he will be talking about shortly, and having a more holistic approach to virtual learning and digital integration. So the core of the job description stays the same. The main change that's happening is the title change.
Thank you, Mr. Stalvey. Any questions, comments? Dr. Green?
Mr. Stalvey, one of the things I was thinking of in light of the conversations we've had the last couple of years. One is I wonder if we should be building in knowledge of ISTE standards. As this person interacts with the other DIS, with the DISs as well as teachers, it seems especially important to think about ISTE standards. And by this, I mean, digital citizenship, critical thinking, collaboration, creativity, communication is very important. That it's not just that what we're expecting is not just reproducing the sorts of things we might have on worksheets, but that we're working with DISs and teachers to develop materials that actually elaborate on that model of written assignments and actually transform them. So I'd like to see, as kind of a friendly amendment to the description, that we integrate knowledge of ISTE standards. But also, the second thing I was thinking of is that, especially in working with a chief academic officer, that this person be have a strong background in developing scope and sequence. The one thing that I think might be missing here and that I think is really important in moving forward is that we're laying out plans with the chief academic officer for goals for integrating technology, as well as the best ways to achieve those goals. So I see that as a sort of an addition that, is a friendly amendment to what this description already includes.
Definitely, I think we should totally include those. We worked all year, and the current director worked all year with the digital integration specialists on the ISTE standards and driving that home and attending the ISTE conferences and things like that. So I think that both of those suggestions are no-brainers, and we will definitely get those added to the job description.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Green. Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Mr. Stalvey. I guess we've got a few more, right, Dr. Cummings?
Yes, and I see Mr. White has joined us, and the rest of those are literacy and academics and some of the CARES Act. So I'll let him tease through the remaining job description. Mr. White?
Sure. Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Anella, board, and Dr. Cummings. So the first position that I'd like to talk about is that coordinator of virtual student and professional learning. So we realize with COVID, but not only that, just where our world is going, we have to start to look at building systems around virtual learning for our students. Again, we have a number of students within the South Bend community that don't necessarily learn in a brick and mortar classroom any longer, and we have to look for other options. But also with that, it gives us the opportunity to expand the offerings for those students that are in classrooms as well. And that's where this coordinator of digital integration and this position would work hand in hand with that. But we know going forward that we will end up having to look at blended learning models and to building a stronger virtual learning system for our students. We also realize that it is highly important that we engage our teachers in professional learning about how to better provide virtual instruction through a learning platform. Right now we use Google Classroom, we looked at Canvas, but regardless, what are those effective strategies that teachers need? But then also, and lastly, this person's job will be for what does the adult learning and professional learning system look like virtually, and how do we build that? We already started that as kind of a test run. That last week of May, we had 3 days of professional learning, and we used Canvas as a platform. So you will see more and more of that, where we build a cohesive system around adult and student learning. Part of the CARES Act funding is that these positions have to be sustainable over time. So as we begin to develop these systems and have them in place, we would shift these over to Title II, which is our professional development federal funds. Any questions regarding those positions? There would be one for elementary and one for secondary, because we know instruction and learning may look different at both of those levels.
Oh, thank you, Mr. White. Any questions, comments? Okay, you can just keep going. Oh, I see Dr. Green. There we go. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. White. I see this as an integral position, and it may, the comment I have may overlap with what I was just saying to Mr. Stalvey. I'm struck by the number of things we would like our teachers to do. One of my concerns, however, is that we need to think more deeply about how different kinds of technology foster different kinds of learning. And one of the things that I see as important is recognizing that different kinds of learning occur, at different grade levels. And so it's one thing to coach, implement, and provide effective professional learning and support. But I would like the description to emphasize the point that this person has to work with educators to think through those things. And I don't think that comes naturally. I was thinking of writing, as you might not be surprised, since I think the writing component of a literacy curriculum is essential. And, the same question has bearing there. What kinds of writing, if we are assigning writing, will lead to different kinds of learning? So I'd like us to expect that this person understands the connections between learning and technology. And it's not just, an iterative process of saying, we need to acquire these tools, we need to teach these tools. But I think in both cases, both the educator as well as the person in this position have to be really aware of how, again, different kinds of tools lead to different kinds of learning, and to make reasonable choices at grade levels so that each grade level builds on the other.
I would agree 100%. And that's why Patrick and I believe strongly that we want to continue the digital integration work. We don't want to stop there. But at the same point, we have to look at what does virtual learning look like? And also, that's why I thought it was important to have someone focus on elementary and focus then on secondary, because I think it does look different at each grade level. And we have to be very strategic about what technology tools we're putting in students' hands at each of those grade levels and the why behind that. So as we're building the questions, when we start to interview possible candidates, I'll definitely make sure that that's embedded within those so we can get at the root of that.
Thanks very much.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Green. What else do you got, Mr. White?
Yep. So then the other positions that you see, the K-5 literacy coach, there's a homeless liaison, and then there's a data coach. These three positions are specific to two buildings. The literacy coach, the K-5 literacy coach, is for Measle Elementary, and then the home liaison and the data coach position would be housed at Rise Up. As part of their school improvement grant applications, we had to do a root cause analysis. And these were the areas of focus that came out of that. We know that Rise Up, our students are struggling with attendance, and we're struggling with that home school connection. So we thought to have someone vital throughout the day that can support making that connection stronger with those students so we can get them graduated is highly important, as well as with the unique challenges or exceptionalities, I should say, that our students at Rise Up come with. We need a data coach to help differentiate each plan of learning for each student. So this person's responsibility is really to connect and to triangulate all the data pieces for students so we can make a well-rounded plan to get that student to graduation.
So, Mr. White, one question. I'm looking at my screen and it says K through 12 literacy instructional coach. You said K through 5. Am I looking at?
Yeah. So the job description, let me make sure because I have them all up here.
Maybe I didn't refresh my board docs.
No, it should read K-5 literacy instructional coach. I think what we did though, in light of realizing that these are school improvement grants and other schools may come up with a school improvement grant rather than us having to bring a new job description each time, We labeled this one a K-12 literacy coach, but for this building, it's a K-5 building, so it would be a K-5 literacy coach.
Got it. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Oh, Mr. Monterosa.
Just as a general comment, it seems to me that all these positions are vitally important for the corporation, especially in light of the fact that we don't know how much longer this pandemic is going to last. And I think that we need to be on top of our, for lack of a better word, on top of our game as far as how we're going to do the best that we can as far in providing this virtual learning environment. So I'm pleased to see that we're seeking that assistance roles to be able to complement what we're already doing at the corporation. And I also am happy to see this position for the data coach and the home liaison. I think it's really important that we continue to support these students that we have at Rise Up Academy. I think that whatever issues they may have, they may have had them arrive at Rise Up Academy. You know, they have that logo or their of the phoenix, that they're seeking to rise from the ashes. And I think whatever support that we can provide to these students can only benefit our entire community as a whole. So I just wanted to express my appreciation for these positions.
Thank you for that, Mr. Monterosa. Anyone else? Any other questions, comments for Mr. White? Yes, Ms. Wesley.
This comment is probably to Dr. Cummings, is that, just really want to be very upfront and frank that we need to really work on that literacy. So I'm happy to see that we have to put that as a priority. And so I'm happy to hear that these new positions are going to be established and that we really truly can put literacy in the forefront, because that's what the public has been asking, and that's what we need to really address. So Dr. Cummings, thank you for your leadership and really addressing the literacy component, and we need to move forward with it. And so I'm really happy to hear about these new positions.
Thank you, Ms. Wesley. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no further questions or comments, all those in favor of approving 10.07, please say aye. Aye. All those against? Okay, we've approved 10.07. Thank you. That ends our action agenda items. Now we're moving on to items from closed session. Dr. Cummings, do we have anything from closed session?
We do have one. And in light of our CAO's resignation tonight and the openings in the new DSL positions we have, I would like to recommend to the board a former principal of Navarre, who's been coaching our folks, some of our folks this year. I would like to recommend Angie Boozy, Miss Angie Boozy, as a part-time DSL for next year. And so should the board approve, I'm thrilled that she's agreed to join us. I think she's going to do great work helping our low-performing schools move to the next level. And I was thrilled when she committed this weekend. And should the board approve this evening, I'd like Ms. Angie Boozy to be one of our DSLs on a part-time basis for next year.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. Do we have a motion to approve Angie Busey as a part-time DSL for 2020-21 school year?
Move.
Moved by Ms. Wesley.
Second.
Second by Ms. Jones. Any further discussions, comments? Yes, Mr. Monterosa.
I would echo what Dr. Cummings had said. I know that Ms. Busey has had an opportunity to serve in a variety of roles within our corporation, and not the least of which was serving as a leader at Navarre Middle School. And I know that she has a passion for students and a passion for our corporation, and I would be in support of this new position for her.
Thank you, Mr. Monterosa. Anyone else?
I'd like to echo Mr. Monterosa. Mrs. Boozy is going to be a great asset. I'm glad that she's coming back to join us to help with her, a lot of her wisdom and knowledge. She's going to be able to help us move the needle. So I'd just like to say thank you, Dr. Cummings, for reaching out and asking Mrs. Boozy to come back and help us.
Thank you, Ms. Wesley. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of approving Ms. Busey as part-time DSL for 2020-21, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against? Okay, she's been approved. Thank you and welcome back. I think it's like the third time, right? Anything else from closed session, Dr. Cummings?
No, Mr. Anella, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to hearing of visitors on other items. Mr. Monterosa, do we have any comments for hearing of visitors?
Yes, there are two.
Okay.
First was from Lori K. McGowan, addressed to Dr. Cummings, Mr. Nella, Ms. Wesley, Ms. Jones, Dr. Green, Mr. Monterosa, Dr. Warren, Ms. Ball. IBM and other tech giants have recently stated that they will stop selling facial recognition technology to police departments for the purpose of citizen surveillance. Does SBCSC currently employ such technology in any of its buildings? Is there a plan to do so in the future? If so, will stakeholders have the opportunity to weigh in on related issues of privacy and known racial discrimination flaws in the AI? Thanks in advance for your reply, Lori McGowan. The second comment on the hearing of visitors is from Delilah Huerta at 911 East Wayne Street, South Bend, Indiana, 46617. A comment from June 15th of 2020. Dear School Board Trustees, congratulations on successfully passing the referendum. I am hopeful that this is a strong demonstration of community support will mark the beginning of a more transparent and genuine relationship with the larger South Bend community. However, as the South Bend Community School Corporation continues to draft its strategic plan, I have been dismayed by the lack of community input that has been sought. Will the corporation follow the model used for referendum input and only seek community input after the strategic plan is already drafted? During the referendum public forums, we often heard that the corporation was currently in its listening phase, yet the allocation of funds and referendum priorities had already been established. I sincerely hope that you will not use this same strategy when it comes to the strategic plan. Of what use is hearing your community speak if there is no path for our input to actually make a difference? The passage of the referendum is a clear indication that you have community members who are willing to support this corporation and our students. Please do not alienate our community by refusing to build real relationships centered on equitable distribution of power, mutual care and concern, and open and accountable methods of communication. We are here to support you. Please let us. Sincerely, Delilah Huerta.
Thank you.
And that concludes the comments, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Monterosa. Okay, that concludes hearing of visitors. Now we are on to board communications. The board has the opportunity to speak at this time. Does anyone wish to speak at this time?
You were looking at me, I can tell.
I was trying not to.
As always, I'd just like to say, I know that our high school students have started summer school. And so they started last week. And so they're going into their second week. And I'm just telling all of our students to just finish strong. You have a little over under 2 weeks to finish. And special thank you to our staff that are working in the summertime and also administrators. I know that we're slowly, Dr. Cummings, you're slowly coming back into the buildings. And so we just like to say thank you. I also want to thank the bus drivers that I've seen out with the Wi-Fi buses. So thank you, Dr. Cummings, for having the Wi-Fi buses out in the community, because our high school students definitely still need the Wi-Fi. So a special thank you for that. My last thing is for Dr. Cummings to kind of consider, and this is just something that's been, come from the community. As we looked at the referendum and we have been getting community input, I'd like for us to look in the future planning of looking into neighborhood schools again. So that if that can be a conversation that could come up. There's been some talk in the community, and I want to make sure that I was very fair. And I got an email from a couple of parents that have asked about in the future of looking at the future thought of looking at going back to neighborhood schools. So I wanted to share that with my fellow colleagues and also with you, Dr. Cummings, if that's something that you and your administration could possibly look at.
Thank you, Ms. Wesley. Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Jones.
Dr. Cummings, can you address how we're going to include the community in the strategic plan process?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Ms. Jones. So when we were talking about and thank you to the community member who wrote, I think it's an exceptional question. When we were talking about the referendum, the board had started their strategic plan work and had gotten to 4 main pillars. Then COVID-19 happened. We began to share those 4 pillars in the community. And so we committed as a board superintendent team that we would not move forward until the strategic plan had been completed, that we'd had community input. And so now our next phase is going to be virtually having talks with Todd, having community forums on those 4 pillars. See if I can do them: literacy, financial sustainability, diversity, equity, inclusion, and community partnerships. The board is going to revisit those 4 pillars and the entire strategic plan on June 23rd. And then we will begin planning a multitude of virtual stops so that folks can interact. We may even use email and surveys to make sure we're hitting everyone. But we'll use the same virtual method. We'll use the same email method that we had. We want to ensure that everyone has a chance to make their voice heard in the strategic plan of the district going forward. Thank you, Ms. Jones, for asking that question.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Monterosa.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm humbled to have received that exemplary governance award from the ISBA. I hope to continue to be deserving of such accolades and know that there is yet much more work to be done. I should state that I am proud to be a part of this board. I believe we reflect the population, the diversity of the population that we serve. I believe that we work well together, we stand by our convictions, and we continue to strive to do what's best for our students. In that vein, I fully support the appreciation and comments of our school board president, Mr. Anella, what he shared with regard to the referendum. I thank this community for your overwhelming support for that referendum. This referendum stood for the proposition that it takes a village to raise a child, and the key question thus became, was South Bend willing to make the investment to do so? The answer was a resounding yes. I also recognize those who opposed the referendum. I believe that this board represents all. We will be held accountable to all as we strive to continue to be transparent, responsive, and to do what's best for our students. As we mentioned when we had our joint meeting with the South Bend Common Council, one way we can do this is to have citizen roles, citizen voices as we proceed with the new way forward. Next, I wanted to compliment Dr. Cummings, his team, members from our school and community color guards, and our high school graduates for a beautiful ceremony as we celebrated SBCSC graduates enlisting in the military, be it the U.S. Air Force, Army, the Marines, the Navy, National Guard. Some weren't even able to be there due to the fact that they were already serving with their respective posts. To our parents, we share your pride in each of those students for not only achieving their high school diploma, but for their courage and determination to serve our country. To our students, thank you for making that commitment and congratulations on your graduation. Finally, I should mention that we continue to hear the community, locally and nationally, in light of the murder of George Floyd, may he rest in peace. As we continue to reevaluate how our system works and what we need to do in order to ensure justice and equality for all, we must realize that we must look at how we can affect positive change here in South Bend. As chair of the Safety and Security Committee, and along with fellow board trustee Olitha Jones, I wish to inform the public that we will be discussing policing within our corporation and surveillance in our safety committee. The physical safety of our students is top of mind, but as well, we should consider their social, emotional well-being. We welcome community input. Please reach out to us by phone or email, or to the extent possible in person. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Monterosa. Appreciate it. Yes, Dr. Green.
I want to just say how much I appreciate Mr. Monterosa's final comments about policing. And we know that this is so much on our minds right now that we need to rethink police presence in our schools. And it reminds me, of course, of how many conversations we've had in the community about the school to prison pipeline. I'm also, of course, overwhelmed by and humbled by the fact that the public believes so much in us, and it reinforces my faith in a public that believes in the common good. And those two things are kind of related in that I think in supporting the referendum, the community has endorsed the idea that we make some bold changes. And I'm looking to Mr. Monterosa and Ms. Jones and their conversation about policing. But it's related to restorative justice, which I think is at the core of what I think is a very bold statement in our embracing the document we voted to support. That maintains our sense of accountability to the Justice Department and our extraordinary commitment to our students in providing fair and just practices in our schools. For too long, we've seen the extent to which we've pushed students out, and we've denied so many students the possibility of having an education. I'm particularly thinking of restorative practices that are part of the plan that are not articulated by name. But when we think about the multi-tiered support systems, it's certainly a part of it. And it's certainly part of the ways in which the Equity Department is beginning to think of its mission. I just want to quote something from Aisha Wynn in Justice on Both Sides, where she talks about how restorative justice in education changes how we conceptualize and administer punishment, shame, and guilt to reflect a more nuanced understanding of harm, the needs of those harmed, and those who have caused harm. It also provides tools that can support all youth and their teachers in cultivating participatory democracy, which should be a function of public education in the United States. I think a hallmark of the work that folks in restorative justice are doing, it's about relationships. It's about collaboration. It's about voice. It's about telling kids that they matter. It's about building community. But it's also making sure that when there are conflicts, we have the tools as educators to repair harm. It's a very forward-looking, progressive idea of criminal justice, and it removes the kind of punishment that we've imposed upon students that does force them out of schools. And what I'm hoping in the comments I'm making, that as a board we adopt, and as a corporation, we begin to think of ourselves as a restorative justice corporation, a community that embraces the very tenets of restorative justice, and that moves us forward to recognizing the humanity and dignity of all of our students as well as our educators.
Thank you, Dr. Green. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no further comments, I guess we can move to adjourn. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Green, seconded by Ms. Leslie. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And we are adjourned. Thank you. Everyone stay safe, stay healthy. Happy summer.